The Supreme Court has ruled that a deputy speaker can form a quorum and vote to make decisions in Parliament. This controversial verdict, supposed to be the solution to a Parliament that has been damaging the reputation of Ghana for almost a year, is turning out to be a problem. The minority NDC that criticized this decision heavily have now turned to use it as a weapon. For the 5th time in 1 week, they have used this decision to block government business in the House because there has not been a quorum to proceed with the business of the House. Those who have been celebrating this decision, the NPP, how do they feel now? And will the NDC have to continue in this manner? We are looking at assessing the implications of this decision for Parliament. How are you surviving the rising cost of living as an individual? And the state, what actions are being taken? The president has summoned his cabinet or the economic team to a retreat ongoing. Will they cut the size of governments as advocated by many? Will they do a cut in their salaries by 25% as advocated by Professor Stephen Adai? Will government take a second look at the free SHS 5 years on and to save the economy? Will government take 30% cut in pay, reduction in the size of the government and stop corruption, cut taxes, cease travels, and ensure there is no free fuel coupons, and reshuffle ministers as advocated by Professor Jampo? Or will it listen to Alex Mould, who wants government to use some $550 million windfall from crude oil sales to cushion Ghanaians? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. Welcome back. This is Newsfile, the most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanene. And here's my take. Do not kill the future. I don't know Justice Abdullahi enough to vouch for him, but I felt hurt when the NPP labeled him as NDC in an attempt to question his motive for taking up a suit whose outcome they celebrate. A deputy speaker can form quorum and vote to decide matters in Parliament. They got the class of their near-cursed, unreasoning followers of vile propaganda to smear the young lawyer and teacher, telling the NDC to stop criticizing the judgment because they didn't get what they wanted using Abdullahi to mount the suit. I reached out to him and confirmed he was honored by the NPP with a certificate for a good job done for their first victory, election victory in the Fourth Republic. That's 2 decades ago, and he quit since then. But if politicians see labeling someone as partisan is how to destroy them as dishonest and without integrity, isn't that self-indicting? MPs damaged Ghana's reputation over an issue, and it has taken this young man who is growing a young law firm to secure a solution to avoid the repeating embarrassment and hemorrhage to government business by the opposition. Let's not destroy young people with promise for this country if we can't support them. They are human and will make mistakes, but it is wrong to shoot and kill their dreams for not being partisan or not declaring so openly. They are partisan people who are impartial and have not lost their sense of judgment and justice. Oliver Mausi Bakavomawo. I googled this name. An impressive CV greets me. He is a consummate academic with iconoclastic ideas, challenging the status quo to force institutional reform for a better life, especially for suffering people who must get the best of democratic leadership that believes in progressive alternatives for reconstructing a more equitable society. He learned that from Harvard. How do I know this? Just by going through his social media messages and listening to him since he became what he calls the accidental convener for Fix the Country. And I, like most of you, got to know him. The first time I met him must have been recently at the Ashaman police station. He told me applying for bail for himself and leaving the many inmates poor and forgotten was simply not good enough. And that is when I appreciated attempts, including at the Supreme Court, by him to fight the status quo for a greater good. If an accused is not to be detained by police for more than 48 hours, if they won't grant him or her bail, and if they are thus compelled to produce this accused before a court so he or she can apply for bail, what justice or logic dictates that it is okay to present such a person charged with a certain offense before a court that cannot grant them bail but can effectively remand them into custody until such time that they can afford the services of a lawyer to apply for bail for them in a higher court with power to grant them bail? It is gratifying to know Oliver will continue this noble pursuit. I interviewed him recently and I had a sense of what he stands for.
I was a person preoccupied with different interests, mainly the philosophy of law and cognitive psychology. I was a person convinced, like many of my generation, that our democracy had not only failed, but was irremediably broken. We knew it needed fixing, that much we were certain of. Except between us, we understood intuitively that it was impossible to fix. And even if it wasn't, our politics will not allow it. It was too vicious. Innocent lives had been lost in the project to fix Ghana. Many had been maimed and communities left fractured. In many regards, those lost and broken lives served as a cautionary tale for why we citizens, or perhaps more accurately subjects, needed to remain pliant and toe the line. We knew to stay away from any ambitious projects of reimagining or pursuing a different vision for our society. Our parents raised us to be afraid of dreaming different. They made no virtue of bold defiance against the political system that had impoverished them and us. My generation was raised to give up. The price of our democracy is that it killed our imagination. It undermined our self-worth and made us distrust the legitimacy of our dreams. There's no denying that before Fix the Country, I too enjoyed the benefit of my relative anonymity. I was known only to those who knew me, and those who knew me well. I was hardly the object of public controversy, And Ghana's broken politics served only as a periodic distraction from a life I had a better grasp on. It was both peaceful and valued. It was a life that took me to working in the biggest law and policy firm in Washington, D.C., in close proximity with several officials who had served high-level roles in the Clinton and Obama administrations, including even Obama's former Attorney General Eric Holder, to the International Court of Justice and to the Legal Office of the United Nations. So in a sense, nothing was missing. And yet something was, if that makes sense. So to fix the country deprived me of my anonymity and thrust me and perhaps the entire nation into a conversation that I think we can all agree came at a time we had not chosen. And yet it came too late. And in that it was disruptive to my life and those of my fellow activists and to our professional engagements. At the time, we did not fully understand what we were signing up for. Fix the Country has aged me and the numerous others who volunteered to take up this charge twice as fast. And yet we took the blows and stood steadfast. You know, when Macho Kaka died, something died in me and the other Fix the Country activists that day, and with him. We lost the desire to apologize for our advocacy, as well as the self-preservation instinct that thrives on stroking the egos of a political class that has taken this country hostage and is actively killing us, both literally and figuratively. Ours is a story of 1,000 heartbeats linked together by a desire for change and a belief in the cause of righteousness. When we sang that God should make us bold to defend our nation and the cause of freedom and of rights, when nursery children today, still studying under trees and in dilapidated classrooms, many years after our independence, sing the same songs, Fix the Country is what they sing of. When we sang that God make us cherish fearless honesty and help us to resist oppressors' rule, Fix the Country was the courage we sang for and the fearless honesty we yearn for. We must shut our ears to those whose stock in trade is to weaponize fear, partisanship, and ethnicity to derail our project. The youth and civic-minded people of this country must understand that time alone will not fix Ghana. Hoping that the benefit of time alone will improve governance in this country is to fail to learn from history. We can no longer afford to give time. Let us not underestimate the destructive power of generational greed and horrible ideas, as well as its ability to be twice as resilient as our quest for freedom. Bad ideas form political parties too. They mobilize people too. They compete for elections too. They form younger cadres, name them Payne or Tescon, and siphon out the soul of young people. They promise them that the public kitty will be theirs for the taking if they are patient and loyal, if they defend corruption with their might, if they insult journalists and abuse activists. The forces that hold this country back are so entrenched in everyday processes that we have become blind to them. To reform our democracy, good people can no longer afford to sit aloof. We cannot leave the burden of activism to a few individuals. Many young people today have put their lives on the line by volunteering their time and energy in the hopes of drawing attention to the fierce urgency of our poverty and those of our parents. We have pointed out the deceptions of this dictatorship of no alternatives that is hidden under the cloak of a superficial multipartisan democracy. Party politics has become a vehicle for rot, corruption, arrogance, and abuse of power. Our hospitals and our roads are killing us. Our school systems are preparing us to fail. Nothing works in this country. To get justice, you must pay for the police to come to your house and investigate the crime. You must go and find the suspect yourself, and you must pay for them to come and effect an arrest. You must pay for them to bring a suspect to court. You must pay for them to show up. This is not a democracy. This is a system that works for only those who are rich and notorious. Half of this country lives in kiosk and dilapidated buildings. There are more Ghanaians living below the poverty line than they did when we sacked the colonial oppressors. We are led by a political class that act like priests who have lost their faith but have continued to keep their jobs. We are a visionless society led by quacks who are not honest enough to admit they are in over their heads. And even if this country were to break down completely, our political class will steal the doorknob on the way out. This is the legacy of the Fourth Republic.
I am Samson Ladi Anyenini. I believe in the Ghana Democratic Project, and that its future is in young men and women like Abdullahi and Oliver Mausi Baker Vomawo. Do not kill the future. And that's my take. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashas University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Robert & Sons. Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. CBG, we stand with you. Edlom Housing, where spacious homes cost less. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. And Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. My guest this morning for the very first segment of this platform, Robert Ni Ade Clerk. He is lawyer and author. Joining us via Zoom, Bobby Banson. He's a lawyer, teaches the law. Justice Abdullahi. He is lawyer and lecturer UPSA Law School and the plaintiff in this matter. Osman Al-Hassan. He is also a lawyer who has written copiously to criticize the judgment. Later, we'll have others joining us, including Mr. John Ewua, Chief Executive Officer, Ghana Association of Bankers, or the banks, Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo, Senior Lecturer, Department of Economics, University of Ghana, and Mildred Aziz, businesswoman, to look at how you can survive this economy, very harsh economy, and what should the managers of the economy do, even as they meet now, to take some decisions. Now, let's go to the Supreme Court's matter. As you know, that there have been criticisms that the judgment is perverse and problematic. There have been growing, criticisms, some of them below the bar, if you want. And there are articles that are being authored, including one by even non-lawyers like Dr. Arthur Kennedy, expressing concern about the unanimous decision, because he feels that whilst Ghanaians are divided, split on the decision, the Supreme Court cannot be so unanimous because they live among us, they live with us, they are part of us. So what is it that leads them to be unanimous when Ghanaians are divided? You've heard President Akufo-Addo, you've heard President Mahama, you've heard the Speaker of Parliament, you've heard Professor Kweku Azza and Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, two friends who don't really disagree, today disagreeing. We are looking at the potential problems that the judgment may bring. How can it be implemented? In just 1 week after the judgment, the minority has used it to hold government business to ransom, blocked proceedings in the House 5 times. Loans that need to be worked at to benefit the country have been stopped because they used the judgment. A judgment they criticized. Anyway, so let me start with Abdullahi, Justice Abdullahi. Thank you very much for joining us, Justice Abdullahi.
Yeah, thank you so much for being part of this program.
Great.
I am indeed elated to be here, and I consider this as possibly my last program on this subject matter, because I have been really heavily exhausted by the media for the past 2 weeks. And so I consider this as the first, possibly the last program that I'll be doing going forward. And so
there are too many young people who are giving up being out there outspoken and contributing to the discourse for good governance and national development. I think it doesn't help this country if too many of us begin to toe that line. I'm guilty. I've stopped, speaking on issues. The media calls me and I just simply tell them I'm not speaking. That's not good.
Samson, in my case, you may understand, particularly because of the tagging and the subtle insults and the potential threats that it comes with. If you notice, during the course, I think yesterday and Thursday, there were rumors that I had snubbed President Mahama and had even insulted him and disrespected him. And some of these made front pages of some of the newspapers, and something that is completely untrue. And so it's quite difficult in such circumstances to continuously be on air, because you never know the next line of mischief that would come because of this.
But did you say or you did not that President Mahama cannot give you advice on law?
Samson, you've always known me. I'll never disrespect President Mahama. And so I'll never use any derogatory comment on him, and not under any circumstances. You've always known me, right from, the years back, as far back I'm sure as 2003. I have never been disrespectful for anyone. And so I wouldn't even want to justify it by explaining it. It will probably just make matters worse. And so if President Mahama is online or whoever is watching, I'd rather render an unqualified apology to him, because he's a person that I respect so much, that he's been a leader of this country.
What are you apologizing for? He's not a lawyer. You spoke the law. And if he's seeking to give you some advice on law and you say he's not qualified to give you advice on law, what sin have you committed?
That is not the apology I'm rendering. The apology I'm rendering is the mischief that has been put on the comment that I made, that I snubbed him, insulted him, disrespected him. That is what I'm apologizing for.
Okay.
As for the issue of whether or not he's a lawyer, I think it's a matter of fact. And that does not amount to an insult. And so I wouldn't apologize on that.
Yes, however that young people must communicate with respect to their elderly.
Absolutely the point, without having to
Thank you.
Disrespect anyone.
So, Justice, now let me begin with you on this note, that for now I'm going to blame you. You are responsible for what is happening in Parliament now. Maybe by now, the 5 attempts by the NPP to have this, it's a European, I'll look for it again and give the correct description of what it is that they have been seeking to pass to help, the economy, and it has been shut down, and other issues too have been shut down 5 times using this judgment. You have caused this.
Admitted. I went into this with that single objective as a patriot, to bring all of us together and be able to forge ahead as nationals with a single objective of developing this country and protecting the welfare of our people, and indeed advancing safety. And indeed, possibly the next objective was to ensure that we get that kind of judgment that all of us would embrace without having to target as a political judgment, as we've always done in this country. Invariably, whatever judgment that would have been obtained if an MPP-sponsored candidate, plaintiff, or an NDC-sponsored plaintiff had gone to the court, most likely would have had that kind of judgment that, however good it might be, people will still shoot it down on the basis that it is colored and tainted with politics. And for me, this was possibly one of the salient objectives for going to the Supreme Court, that because I'm not linked to any of these political parties, I do not hold any political party card. I am not a member of any of these political parties. I felt deeply that, particularly also being a lawyer, if I appear before the Supreme Court and obtain a judgment, however unfavorable that judgment might be to myself as a person or to whoever who will be affected thereby. And indeed, having said that, I need to point out that indeed all of us are affected equally by this judgment, whether you consider it as a lose or you consider it as a win,
okay,
you are affected equally thereby. Because really it's a judgment that, as you rightly pointed out, the NDC and MPP will all use it going forward, because it becomes a guiding principle for all of us, and so all of us are equally affected. It's not really a loss or a win for Justice Samtulai. Now,
do you feel personally hurt? And I'm asking from a lawyer's perspective. In this case, you went as a plaintiff. As a lawyer, I go to court, I put my best foot forward, do the best I can for my clients, and that's where it has to end. You don't go to court always seeking to win, because that's not how it ought to be. So do you feel personally hurt that you wanted the court to say that deputy speakers cannot preside and vote to take decisions, and the court disagrees with you?
Something I'm not hurt. I however disagree with that position, because I did feel and strongly still feel safe that if you check our constitutional history, that office, the Speaker's office, and in that, when I say Speaker, including his deputies, has been an office that has been tagged with neutrality and impartiality. And this is what I have been saying from day one, in fact, right from the moment that the judgment was delivered, that that portion of it I disagree, because I felt strongly that it is the best way that we would have the best from Parliament. If you have a Speaker tainted with politics, or who is seen to be politically aligned, you are likely to have a decision that would invariably favor a political party rather than advance the national interest. And that way you do not get the best out of it, obviously.
Right.
So to that extent, indeed, I wasn't happy that the Supreme Court told the line that they did, because I was hoping that the Supreme Court will not only look at the present circumstances, but also consider future occurrences.
Right. So
really, I will supposed to be a great document.
Right. I'll return to you. I'll return to you so that we can get a sneak peek into, because we've heard you in the media say that you are looking at the possibility of a review, and that you've been trying to draft some things to see. Let's see where you have gotten to and whether it looks, good. At least a few of the points that may convince the public that it's worth going back when a unanimous decision has been taken. As far as the public is concerned, because it's unanimous, there's no point wasting your time going back. But we as lawyers know that that is not what it ought to be. It can be unanimous today, and on review, some of them may change their mind because of some things that are brought up later. Bobby Banson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Do you still teach the law at the law school?
Yes, civil procedure.
Great. Now, what will you say first off about how the judgment is presently being used? And among others, it has been used to block government from getting approval for a 20 million euro German Development Bank renewable energy agreement. They cited lack of quorum. You hear the minority. Anytime they want to start the business, they get up. And now they have proclaimed that with the exception of prayers, everything will go by vote.
Good morning, Samson, and thanks for having me. Before I address your question, I would want to use this opportunity to encourage my friend Justice. I mean, I agree and I associate myself with your admonition to him that in his practice as a lawyer, I'm sure he would have come across clients who are as difficult as the media he claims, and have bastardized him for things he has even not done. I mean, this is not the first case he's been that is in the public. Some have been in the public and he's been wrongly misrepresented. But for the sake of posterity, it's not all of us that can wear that crown. So if his neck is strong enough to wear that crown, some of us will be behind to continue to push him. And it goes further for the call that there may be perhaps a time for a public fund to be set up to sponsor some of these things, so that people like Justice will not only be committing his time, because he's a professional, he's a lecturer as well, his financial resources, and at the end of the day be bastardized by the media. But if there are civil societies that will commit time and fund and resources to some of these things, then it will depersonalize it, so that people will not see that, oh, it is Justice who has sat somewhere. So I think something, you made this call some time ago, maybe we should push that agenda and get these civil societies that speak about some of these things to commit resources into a fund so that persons that feel strongly about these constitutional matters, that have a far-reaching events on our democracy, on our corporate governance events, and our society as a whole, will be sponsored not in their personal capacity, but of the group, so that it will depersonalize it. Okay.
Now, just hold on briefly for me there, because this is a very interesting point. And I understand Osman just joined us. Osman, what do you think about this? Because these litigations that individual Ghanaians take are not for their private personal interest. They benefit all of us. A good example, Martin Pebu went to the court a number of times and said there ought not be a crime labeled as non-bailable. He's been successful. Because of that, every offense is subject to, amenable to bail. Because of him, if you get arrested, you get a surety, and the surety, the person runs away. The surety is not arrested and put in jail. What do you say about this idea about a fund for constitutional public litigation?
Well, it's a great idea, because there are so many things that need to be clarified in the Constitution, and see, it takes courage for someone to enforce a constitution, because it's a national document, and where you go is the highest courts of the land. And so if we need clarity, and you see, constitution, the way we implement constitution determines the national security as well. If you look back in history, you see, if we joke with a constitution, things can happen. And so if someone undertakes to enforce a constitution or to bring clarity to the path the constitution has charted for us, I think it should be commented, and I think any support for it is great.
Thank you very much. Let me get Robert's view on this. What do you say about that? You hear people, particularly those who are very critical and those who are in politics and are engaged in propaganda. You say one thing, they say go to court. If you go to court, it's money.
It is. It definitely is. But I think that we should go to court whenever we can. It's the nature of the game. It is a system that we have all agreed to play by. And so I believe that we should go to court. And I really want to commend Alhaji for going to court. In the end, what he wanted, he didn't get. But he still got us to get some clarity with respect to a certain position. I do not think that he should bow out at this time or be disturbed by people commenting or people labeling him or call him whatever. That's the name of the game. I mean, look at all the history of Ghana. You can go back as far as wherever to look at our constitutional challenges, etc., and all of that. These are people who have taken bold steps to challenge things which they did not agree with, and it will not end now. On the specific point of getting a group to fund such projects, trust me, it sounds like a good idea, but it will be a difficult one to implement. I say so because, look, we're in a society where every group is labeled. Every group is labeled. Some group, the most recent example would be Occupy Ghana. If I were to ask people ordinarily, what do you think Occupy Ghana supports in this country? They will give you a political party, correct or wrong. So it depends on who comes together. And are we likely to get people of the two leading political parties in this country coming together to form that? For which reason we probably now a belief of political bias.
It could be a fund in the justice system, the judiciary, so that once you file the process, then you are refunded for your expense. What you would have normally charged from a client, at least you can get, say, about a quarter or half of it.
So are you addressing just cost? Are you addressing just the cost, or are you addressing the political clouding and the coloration that comes with it?
Bobby's suggestion is about the cost. Okay. To fund the people. Because justice is contemplating a review.
Right.
And you can imagine the time he's had to spend.
Absolutely. That wouldn't be a bad thing to do.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I mean, if you're talking just about the cost of it and you want to do it, but I don't see it happening.
Okay.
I don't see it happening again because if you say the state should fund actions against itself, we know that the state is the state and it's not necessarily the political party in theory. In practice, we know who is the defender of the state, the party in power at any given point in time. Enough of a reality.
So it should be a public fund.
So public fund, something is somebody has to initiate it.
All right.
The only time I see it happening is when the party is about to exit office. Then they are happy maybe in the last 2 months.
So Bobby, I get back to you on how this judgment has been used, at least in 1 week. The minority says, except for prayers, everything will be put to a vote. And when it comes to a vote, they will need to determine quorum.
Yes, it wasn't not to be expected, or it's not surprising. They had made those suggestions as soon as the judgment was passed, that they were going to follow it to the latter. And to the extent that what they are asking for is in line with the Constitution, you cannot fault them. And I watched one of the videos where when it came to, I think, discussing an amendment to the criminal law or something like that, they didn't complain, they finished. And as soon as he came to the loan agreement, they said, hey, hold on, we do not have a quorum.
Yeah.
And the deputy majority leader was very livid. But at the end of the day, you see, it goes to the point that even though they are there in their partisan colors, they should think of the national development agenda. Parliament's foremost responsibility is to pass laws to aid in the development of the country. And so even if the Supreme Court has said it is A, B, C, D, some of them are not happy. This loan is not going to develop constituents that voted for MPP. It's going to every single part of the country.
Interesting.
And so I believe that the various chief whips of the parties or the leadership should be able to reach a consensus on some of these things, and then let's move the country forward.
Ni, what do you say about that? And there have been times I have spoken here about the statistics, and our parliament is a place you have a lot of lazy people. They cannot be bothered. They get all the fat salaries, they get all the perks that come with it, but often they are not interested in the business of the house. So even getting the ordinary quorum of, is it 92 people, has become difficult before that a budget has had to be shelved because they can't find just that small number out of what, 275. So what does it say about them in the first place that they can't get a quorum?
You know, I remember that back in the law faculty when we went there some 20 years or so ago, at the beginning when Professor Kumado was our professor, I remember that this issue about attendance and numbers was discussed in one of the tutorial sessions. And I remember, if I remember correctly, that Professor Kumado had made a point that he had done some research about attendance and numbers and all of that. And at that time, I think there were 200 of them, right? And that the explanation that he had received was not so much that they were lazy per se, to borrow your word, but that he had discovered that there were so many things that happened in that building outside of the main chamber. So there were so many committee meetings, there were visits to places.
The facts would show that is a lame excuse, whilst it can be germane in certain circumstances.
Right.
In sometimes, for example, the NPP wants to do some particular business. What is it that is being done in some committee that deprives them from marshalling their numbers into the house? And now you see how they are livid and criticizing Adwoa Safo and saying she is holding them to ransom. But you can't even count half of your members in the house to get a quorum.
Yeah, so that's the point I'm making.
An ordinary business.
So the point is that is the explanation that we have heard. Sometimes, I mean, I don't know how it works, but I think that there should be a solution. The solution is that Parliament is there to do a business. And when it works in plenary, perhaps that is the main business. But that's not to take away the things they do in bits.
Right.
Nothing stops Parliament. And I'm sure we'll have that discussion about it being a master of its own rules and all that. I have a position on that, you know, constitutionally, how it fits into the judgment of the Supreme Court and all, and whether we have really created a new scenario and all. It's a very key point that I would like to deal with at some point. But nothing prevents Parliament from ensuring that whenever it has to do with core business, if you may call it so, where it's sitting in plenary and all of that, that it will not have any side business at the time. Nothing prevents Parliament from doing so, and the courts have said that consistently from Tufo and Attorney General through 31st to whatever, all those cases to date, including the Abdullahi case. What happens in that they can do it. So they can say that, look, in order to ensure that our business rides and runs and all of that, we will not be doing these committee sittings and whatever at this point, at that point, and all of that, so that we can ensure that people are there. I think that is what will help, you know, to check the problem. And also some discipline, some enforcement of attendance, and it's work.
Speaker after speaker have complained about this attitude of the MPs, but they don't seem to get any results. Unfortunately, they don't also apply the rules that could lead to sanctioning some of them. I don't know what we can do, but Osman, let's hear you briefly on this. And this exposes something that we have been familiar with. They are often without a quorum, but they do the business. They overlook. When we were pursuing the RTI Act bill, I knew what was going on. So a person who doesn't want the RTI bill, they will do all the business without a quorum. Immediately it gets to the RTI bill, then somebody will rise up and say there's no quorum. And by the law, once somebody says there's no quorum, they must stop. Is this the way this judgment should be used? In the way the minority is using it? Oh, Osman just left us. Okay, interesting there. This is Newsfile brought to you by Bank of Africa, MTN, NHS University, Robert & Sons, Waylead Properties, CBG, Edlom Housing, Duraplast, and Rehoboth Properties. Now, let's get to how to implement the decision of the House. Bobby, before I get to Bobby, yes, Abdullahi. So, does it look, are the prospects any bright for a review? Now that we are talking about possibly getting some fundraising to help you. Please unmute your mic.
Sorry, thank you so much. The funding will be a welcoming news because I've already put it out there that I'll need all the support that I can. And indeed, it shouldn't just be limited to funding. It should also include other material support and advices that come from all of you. I have had some of our colleagues from both ends offering pieces of advice, giving me leads as to what they think I should look at for the possible review. Some even giving authorities to aid in the review application processes. And
by saying authorities, he's referring to research material. Yes, go ahead.
Indeed. And I'm indeed grateful for all those showing that love and concern for Mother Ghana. I do not think it is a love for Justice Abdullahi.
Right.
I take it as a love for Ghana. And I have also indicated I've rejected some few monies donated by some other persons. And I had to do so because I take it that those who actually have the resources, who can fund this, because it's an expensive venture, they are available and they should be able to do the funding, and not the ordinary Ghanaian who is already struggling for bread and butter. I've had to return some few thousands and 2,000 here and there, and I am deeply grateful for those who have been doing that. I don't take it lightly. I take it as a very good gesture from Mother Ghana, not for my personal gain.
Give us a sneak peek into the prospects. Let's say about three main grounds, potential grounds.
I'll come there. I thought you would allow me to. I know the time is of the essence here, but I was hoping to exhaust your question first before I come to the grounds. But if you want to push me there, we all, as the Supreme Court itself said, this is a very difficult area because, as they admitted, there are no precedents anywhere, and so they literally have to do a literal interpretation of the Constitution to come up with a decision. In fact, if you check the decision itself on the interpretation of these matters, just about 5 pages. I mean, the rest were to discuss whether they have jurisdictions and other policy reasons and stuff. But the real issue was less than 5 pages, and that tells you how difficult it was for the Supreme Court to come up with this decision. And unfortunately, it has been met with these.
So hold on for me there, Osman. And I speak to Osman and come to you, Bobby, before I come back to the studio. Bobby, when I come to you, I'd like you to tell us whether you think that the threshold required for a review is not too difficult in these circumstances. The 2 grounds for which a review will be permitted, because a review is not at large, you know. So Osman, you have also written, and from the position you share, which aligns with Professor Kukwasari and others who disagree with this judgment, what do you see to be the potential grounds that can overturn this decision?
Well, first of all, as for the grounds for review, you know, it's a very narrow corridor. And so they will first ask you what's the error of law. So definitely you need to demonstrate some error of law that, you know, that occasion miscarriage of justice. As for miscarriage of justice, you know, we all are the victims. The whole country is the victim if there's an error of law. But looking at it, I have already written that I think the Supreme Court didn't take into consideration some other words in Article 102, which has to do with the exception clauses, or with what I call the saving clauses. You know, Article 102 is the only provision that mentions the idea of the presiding officer in Parliament not being part of a quorum. That's where it is mentioned. But we are asked to limit it to that provision. And I'm saying that there are some other provisions in Article 104(2) that import that limitation into 104. Because you see, if you look at that provision, 104(2) especially, which is talking about the members of Parliament voting, I think majority of members of Parliament voting, determining a matter by vote, you will see that it started with the words except as otherwise provided in this Constitution. And you see, and the except as otherwise is an exception for the quorum, is an exception for the number of members, is an exception for who will be a member of the quorum. That is being provided for in Article 104. For me, I have made that argument so clearly. I tried my best to make it so clearly that they didn't take into consideration those saving clauses. And you can see that in other provisions where there are saving clauses in the judgment, they took very serious consideration of them and they arrived at a conclusion. For me, I don't think the context of the Constitution, as they said, has warranted a departure from the provision that is linking speaker to a presiding officer. Because you see, a deputy speaker or anybody presiding is acting in the stead of a speaker. And there's a provision of the Constitution that says that anytime we mention speaker in the Constitution, we are referring to the person also presiding. But you see, the Supreme Court has come to the conclusion that no, that provision doesn't apply, because in it, there is the word except or unless the context otherwise requires. And they went through the whole provisions of Article 95, 96, 97, and came to the conclusion, Chapter 10, and came to the conclusion that no, that context does not, requires that they don't call or they don't refer to the deputy speaker who is acting as the speaker, which means that every limitation, privilege, or right that applies to the speaker will not apply to the deputy speaker when he's presiding. I think I disagreed with that, because I think that the context rather reveals otherwise, contrary, because you see, it is the principle of objectivity and impartiality that the context revealed that the framers of the Constitution wants to project. If you look at it well, because you see, when the speaker becomes a speaker, he ceases to be a member of Parliament. Now, if you look at, if we leave the speaker alone and go to the deputy speaker, you will find that if a minister or a deputy minister becomes a deputy speaker, under Article 81, he ceases to be a minister, which means that the Constitution doesn't want the deputy speaker, just like the speaker, to be a member of the executive. So you can see, so why would the Constitution prevent the deputy speaker from being a minister or deputy minister? It is because it wants to be, the Constitution wants him to be impartial, because he would be presiding. And you see, to say that because there's an express provision relating to the speaker, excluding him from being from voting or from having original or casting vote, but no express limitation on the deputy speaker, I think that also is erroneous.
All right. Now, if you can deal with this last one briefly for us, then we'll continue. You also, like others, impeach the Supreme Court, as it were, invoking its jurisdiction to strike down Order 109 of the Standing Orders of Parliament as being null, void, and of no effect. How so?
Yes. You see, first of all, I expressed concerns about the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court not properly being invoked in this matter. Because, you see, we have looked at several cases and we have realized that even where the original jurisdiction is invoked in respect of interpreting some provision of the Constitution, if the provision of a Constitution comes up for interpretation which is not stated in the original rate, they decline interpretation of that particular, and I have cited several cases. But in this case, you can see that Justice Abdullahi never brought in any provision of law saying that it is inconsistent with any provision of the Constitution before the Supreme Court. Secondly, you could see that the interpretation of the Supreme Court is filling up a gap because they admit that there has not been any provision that limits the deputy speaker from being part of a quorum or from voting. So the same way, there's no provision giving him that right to count himself. There's no express provision anywhere that says that the deputy speaker should be part of a quorum or should have an original vote. And so we take it that this is a matter the Constitution hasn't provided for.
Okay.
And if the Constitution hasn't provided for it, I think the best place is the residual powers of Parliament, which is in 298.
Okay.
And so the Constitution confers on Parliament residual powers to deal with matters that it doesn't provide for. The Constitution, the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction to fill in those gaps. That's my point.
All right. I think maybe eventually I'll ask you guys to maybe in some 30 seconds or 1 minute, tell me your view of whether or not it's not a good guide to look at the 1957 and then look at the Parliament Act, Section 14 also, as a guide as to what was intended. That in fact, a deputy speaker was intended to be able to exercise his vote even when he was presiding or whoever was presiding. Now, Bobby, does it not look like the grounds as they are an attempt to enter the eye of a needle? Hello, Bobby.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I would have to agree with you. It looks like, to be frank, like a 0.1% chance. You see, the reason mostly being that with a review, unless in exceptional circumstances, it is the same panel, the 7 original panel is retained and 2 members are added. And so you are starting from a position where you have 7 against 2. I mean, I know not like mathematically, but at the back of your mind, the 2 are the ones that are coming in with fresh mind. And so the ease with which you can convince them, it's let's say on an equal 50-50. But with the 7, they already have given you their conclusion and it was unanimous. And so it's like you're moving them from 0 to 50. It's tougher. And that is a fact we must admit. More so when the Supreme Court have indicated that even if their decision was erroneous, you cannot come and argue the same points of law before them on review. And let me give you this interesting, you know the NIB case, where the Supreme Court held that the fact that the plaintiff did not endorse the rate with an address rendered the whole rate nullity.
Right.
You know, there was an application for review. Right. That time, Justice Amegache was the lawyer, and he argued it. Justice Atugubag made a very interesting statement. He said that on second thoughts, and I'm paraphrasing, he agrees that the decision may have been erroneous. However, because of the limited circumstances that they can exercise their review jurisdiction, he would decline the application for review, with the hope that if similar facts come before the Supreme Court by way of a fresh writ, the Supreme Court would depart from that previous decision. And so, and Justice Dateba has given in numerous cases this particular instance, or this particular ambit, where they say, okay, our decision may have been erroneous, but the ambit of a review is so tiny that we would not use it as another appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, because there's no appellate jurisdiction. And so even though it's you will be able to let them see the error in their decision, it will be difficult to argue fresh points of law or error apparent on the face of law. From what Abdullah said about the basis for his review application, he's not introducing any new law. He's saying that Justice Kulendi and his colleagues misinterpreted and misapplied the law. So you are not saying that there's a new law that was not brought to their attention. All that you are saying is that there may have been misinterpretation of it. And so you are not arguing any fresh error of law, but saying that you disagree with their conclusion. And they may see it as you trying to invoke an appellate jurisdiction, which they do not have.
You are re-arguing your case.
You are redoing your case. So and I know you've not asked, I do not agree with the conclusions of the court on this. I do not. For various reasons, most of which have been argued by my brother Osman. If I may add, just briefly, that if you look at the part of the decision that was stated, that there is no way the framers would have intended that a member of parliament will be denied a right to vote for his constituency. Under no circumstances should any standing orders be interpreted to have that effect. You ask yourself, what happens to the provisions in the standing orders that gives parliament the right to sanction and suspend a member from sitting if he is found guilty of contempt of parliament? So that member who has been suspended, for instance, cannot vote. I think there's 5 sittings or 7 sittings. And so why didn't the Supreme Court go to the extent of striking out those provisions in the standing orders too?
Can that not be said to be an exception?
Yes, but in that same way where the standing orders give a clear provision that seems to take away a right of the member to vote under certain circumstances.
Because of a conduct that is prohibited.
Yes, so why are we not saying that same powers of parliament to pass these standing orders, where they have expressly, remember that standing order leaves no room for ambiguity. There's no ambiguity in that order. That states clearly that if you are presiding, you do not have a right to vote. It is stated very clearly with no ambiguity. So why are we saying in one aspect, no, we will not agree because it takes away the right of the member to represent his people. But that same way, why wouldn't Parliament say, listen, the person may have committed a crime. We will not allow him to partake in parliamentary debates. But when it comes to voting, he can come and vote because he's representing his people. It leaves a lot of room for inconsistency.
Interesting. Thank you, Bobby Benson. And now let me come to Nia de Klerk. And the Supreme Court, by the law, will not review a decision unless on 2 grounds: that there is an exceptional circumstance which has resulted in miscarriage of justice. So the circumstance must be exceptional, number 1, and 2, it must have resulted in miscarriage of justice. You need to show that. Or number 2, that after the decision, you have discovered a new and important, it must not only be new, but it must be an important matter or evidence which, after the exercise of due diligence, was not within your knowledge or could not have been produced by you at the time the decision was given. What a tall order. Yes, me.
Absolutely. It's a tall order because that is what it is. The basis of that is what a Latinate expression, interest republicae, puts it finis litigation.
You love your Latin.
Yeah, that's in the interest of the republic that litigation must come to an end.
That's right.
At some point. And that we can see the difficulty with the Supreme Court when it exercises its original jurisdiction. That can be some sort of a challenge to that principle. Because then generally, if the case goes through a number of courts, is on appeal, high court, blah, blah, name it and comes, you think that, look, it must come to an end at some point. But with the constitutional interpretation, we've decided that then we can have some sort of a review, not just with constitutional review, but I'm saying that in that arena, that's what you get. And that review, considered by as many as 5 people at a minimum, in this particular case, 7 people who have gone through whatever it is they have considered, we think that you must have a good basis to seek a review of it, which is that we get a second bite of the cherry. So it is a difficult exercise. Nobody can deny that. Exceptional circumstances. You have to even convince the court that these things that I consider exceptional should be exceptional to you. And in addition to that, that you sitting there listening to me was involved in a miscarriage of justice. I mean, as one leg, and also a new important matter. And they have emphasized, I was just looking at Republic versus High Court General Jurisdiction case in 2020, where the court, I think it was Chief Justice himself, was very clear, citing previous authorities, that the Supreme Court will not permit a review to be a rehearing of the matter, where they were distinguishing between an appeal and a review. And the Supreme Court has done that consistently. If you're on appeal, it is a rehearing. We can decide to look at the record. In a review, we can look at the record only when those exceptional circumstances arise. Otherwise, you must show us these 2 things. And I'm sure that Alaji knows that. Osman knows that. Everybody else there knows it. It's part of our training. We know it. And it is the rules by which we play. At this stage, if Alaji can show us those exceptional circumstances, a miscarriage of justice, discovery of new material and all of that, then I think that the Supreme Court should hear him. I am not worried about whether he will end up with a 7-2 or a 9-2 or 7-2, right? Because you had 2 more, so you get a 9. And a 7-2, or that you get an 8-1, or you get one. That is not my worry. And so I will not say don't go simply because 7 have already done it. His challenge at this time is to convince himself within the period that he has, is a month or so.
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days to convince the court that he can find these. If he cannot, so be it. This is the state of the law, and
the door is shut.
Yeah, the door will be shut. But look, I think that we should have better minds to a certain provision. You know, a lot of the time I hear this point being made that, look, the Supreme Court did not have some old decision to go by, or that there was no guide on them. But that is why it is the Supreme Court. That is the reason it is the Supreme Court, actually.
But you know, as a lawyer, it's difficult when you're arguing and you can't have precedent to fall on.
Absolutely.
I've done one such case recently, and it's difficult.
Absolutely.
You must engineer the new arguments.
I love that, actually. I prefer that. A lot of the time, the so-called precedents do not deal with the issue the way you are bringing it before the court.
Right. Times have changed.
You've had so many discussions. People have talked about standing. People have talked about the participation of Parliament in this matter. People have talked about the political question doctrine as it applies. People have spoken about the standing orders.
People have questioned why the Attorney General, who represents and is a political appointee,
is now appearing on behalf of Parliament, which is a different arm of government.
Appearing on behalf of the people who are coming to the court against.
Because he's an advisor to the executive, not to Parliament, and that becomes a matter. And then people questioning and all that. Look, the political question doctrine in particular, which is a very key discussion in this, has featured in the Supreme Court judgments of this country as far as judicial review is concerned on so many bases. Yes, in Tufon Attorney General Sowa read the judgment. He never used the expression political question. So I'll leave that, even though he did a lot of analysis that formed the basis.
In simple terms, what is political question doctrine?
Okay. So as I was saying, 20 years ago, when we were all reading these matters, we saw these cases and these references and all of that. Even Baker and Carr is on the at the law faculty Legon. Baker and Carr is part of the cases on the course outline. We went through it and touched on it. But I must tell you that it is in studying for and taking the New York bar exam that I really came to appreciate some of these things. And Kwesi Prempeh in particular, HKP, I've known him for over 20 years. An extremely bright fellow. I'll set him apart, tell you the truth.
He says this judgment
Yes.
is fidelity to the text and
Yes.
structure of the Constitution.
I agree with him.
Even though he has some issues and calls it messy, including the Attorney General representing, as it were, the other side.
I'd like to say quickly that the Attorney General representing the other side is not a problem in the eyes of the current law. What he is saying sounds more like a recommendation to me. The point is that, can you fault the fact that this is what happened? Is he saying that he faults?
But the Supreme Court has had cause to say that it's not in every situation that the Attorney General can competently represent an institution of state.
I agree.
Yes,
so because Attorney General,
because the Attorney General's, as it were, position may or will conflict with that entity.
Samson, don't misunderstand me.
Right.
I agree with Kwesi Prempeh's point. I am saying that he cannot tell me that for that reason this judgment is defective.
Okay.
That's the point I'm making.
He doesn't say that.
Okay, I am saying that structurally, I agree with him 1,000% that we have an Attorney General who is a member of the executive, clearly a legal advisor to the president, etc., representing the matter featuring parliament. It's a place we should look at. It makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm saying that it is on that basis. We cannot say that because of that this judgment has been rendered nugatory. I hope you get the point I'm trying to establish. That it does not become nugatory only for that purpose. That it makes a lot of sense to say that in matters like this, perhaps we should look at somebody else doing the representation, all of that. Political question doctrine. The political question doctrine, as I have understood it, you have come to understand it, it's quite simple. It says that there are times when, and don't forget, it's an American constitutional development.
All right.
That's what we need to understand. It is a concept in American constitutional law.
So he says there are times when what?
They are saying that generally, there are situations where, for example, final judicial authority or final authority is given to a certain body, a certain other institution other than the judiciary, to make a determination on an issue. When that arises, because that person has been given that power, or that organ of government has been given that power, you must leave that organ to make the final determination on that particular matter. That is what it is. In fact, they have a whole line of cases, but we keep referring to Baker and Carr because Baker and Carr gave us about 6 scenarios, and we have our Supreme Court in J.H. Mensah versus Attorney General, and Supreme Court in the case of what do you call it, the NPP versus Attorney General 31st Zimba in particular, all of that dealt with those matters at length. They all talked about that American concept which is creeping into Ghanaian law. The position has been taken, and I don't know if it will waste your time. If it will not waste your time, if you will permit me, I would like to just read a small portion on Justice Akwa's comment on the political doctrine question.
So in the very common way, many have said that the political question doctrine simply means, or is a doctrine that refers to the idea that an issue is so politically charged that the courts, which are typically viewed as a political branch of government, the apolitical branch of government, should not hear the issue when it comes before them.
So here it is. I'll give you the 6 bases. Okay. 1, textually demonstrable constitutional commitment of the issue to a coordinate political department. That's 1. 2,
don't interfere in someone because you are all arms of government.
Yes, because the Constitution, you're not saying that because you are all arms of government, you're saying that the Constitution has given that power to another organ of government.
Okay.
The political question has arisen so many times. For example, in the US, the president has the authority with respect to some foreign policy matters and all of that. When he takes a decision on that score, should the court interfere or not? We've had some exceptions to which with respect to some citizenship of an American born in Israel, and whether for that reason, all those things. I don't want to get too much into that, but just so people understand. The first one is that the Constitution itself, which is supreme, says that when it comes to this matter, this organ, the executive or the legislature is the final authority. So that part of power has already been given.
Okay.
Or two, there's a lack of judicially discoverable and manageable standards for resolving it. And recently they've been talking about gerrymandering and things like that.
Yeah.
That when they are coming for order, can we have a judicially manageable basis to make a determination with respect to borders and drawing them and all of that? And if they don't think so, then they will leave that to Congress also.
So to the question.
But in Ghana,
to the question, do you see any implications
yes,
for the future of the parliament and our governance
yes,
that this decision brings up?
we see a lot in this. And just to close that, so in Ghana, largely constitutional assignment. The Supreme Court has said, and perhaps you don't have time, so I'll leave it.
Okay.
That the political question doctrine is not something that we take hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And all the other. Something again. Just give me 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
There's this important thing that we need to understand. This point is that, look, we are running a state. We have our rules. We have a history, whether we like it or not. We came from somewhere. We all know that we were colonized by the British, correct? We know that the British have their rules. I've heard a lot of debates, even from some members of parliament, saying, for example, that the British parliament does this and that. Jack, let's understand where we stand. Today, even today, you know that currently the British have a Supreme Court. They didn't used to have one. It was the House of Lords.
Right.
Since the 1st of October 2009, they have instituted a Supreme Court. That has not changed the understanding of judicial review when the court is pronouncing something unconstitutional. They say clearly that the Supreme Court of the UK cannot declare primary legislation as unconstitutional. Why? It is based on a certain belief in what? Parliamentary sovereignty. Cross over to the United States of America, who were also colonized by the British. They say that the court, as the final arbiter, can declare these matters unconstitutional. However, in doing so, they make a certain limitation based on their understanding of separation of powers by saying that they have a political question doctrine in itself struggling to come to terms that says that when that final authority or some other basis exists, that the court will not do that thing, and yet they still allow the court to make that pronouncement that is for that person. I can still sue you. It doesn't mean I can't go to court.
Right.
The court can make the pronouncement that, oh, in this instance it belongs there. Bro, we had that 1957 constitution battles. You remember Laudan number 2 against Attorney General and all that. That question came up. The court itself in Ghana said that there was some parliamentary sovereignty that they could not strike as an act. In Wari against Oforiatta at that time, an act was struck down as invalid. But 1960 was tighter. And that is where we had our seminal Riakuto case. And look, if we don't look at the background to these matters, we get lost in the...
So what are the implications we can see?
All right, I guess you want me to end the historical analysis.
Yeah.
So I'll come to the implications that we can see. The implication we can see is that Ghana has charted its own course. We have been charting this course for a very long time. We have taken the position that because once upon a time, we could even have a PDA passed by Parliament, where in somebody's satisfaction, they can arrest you, as the Supreme Court said in that time, prior to you committing the act, based on some problems that you could cause us. It went to court.
Put you in jail without trial.
The Attorney General at that time, Geoffrey Bing, who is from the UK, argued parliamentary sovereignty. J.B. Dankwa...
The judgment refers to this.
J.B. Dankwa, yes. Yeah. J.B. Dankwa argued the other side. J.B. Dankwa lost. But the J.B. Dankwa position became the position of Ghana starting from 1969, where we wanted to be clear that the final arbiter is the Supreme Court, and that the court can deal with these matters. Of course, the Constitution is supreme. And we have held on to that position to date. So we don't do too much history. What I see is that we are clear in our minds at this time through this judgment that the final arbiter, whichever way you look at it, is the court.
Okay.
That the court can make us whatever Parliament does, it can do. Okay. There's this argument about some closed book and all of that.
Yeah.
They say that what Sowa said was that as long as what Parliament has done is in conformity with Article 91 at that time, or that is in conformity with the Constitution today, it's a closed book.
Okay.
But if it doesn't follow, that will not happen. Okay. So today we have taken a position in Ghana, and it's clear that when there's a dispute, where there's a parliamentary action, where there's an act, where there are standing orders, whatever, and it flies in the face of the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, the courts are in the position. There's no political question limitation to declare that this will happen. But what we have seen is that on the political front, what is happening in Parliament is what will happen. What is the way out? We have to learn to live with each other. we have to now learn consensus building, something we have never done. It's a very divided political front in parliament. It has always been. For the first time, the numbers are forcing us to find a way to work together, to find middle ground, to make peace with each other, and to all of that. The anger will die down, I think. What is happening will die down. Somebody's taking sack in the fact that they won a decision. And yet now the other side seems to be the one who is using it for their own benefit and all of that. I think calm heads to prevail. The leadership there should be made to come together. We must sit. And we are now forced, whether we like it or not, to talk to each other. It's like two bad friends who are two talented members of a football team who need to rely on each other.
Okay.
And that is the scenario we have.
Yeah, so I'm asking you guys briefly to tell us what you think are the implications for the parliament in the implementation of the decision. One of the deputy speakers, first deputy speaker, Joe Osei-Usu, has said that he will not even attempt to step down from his seat to cast his vote, because that is what brought the fight the last time. He will remain in his seat and simply be counted for the quorum and proceed to vote when it's time for voting. How is that going to be easy to implement? But first, what do you say whether or not Section 14 of the Parliament Act, and as I said earlier, which repeats, if you like, the 1957 provision, what does that say to you? Because in that provision, it says a deputy speaker or any other who is presiding has an original vote. He does not only have a casting vote. Bobby, let me have Abdullahi first. Very briefly, in 1 minute.
Samson, what we have to remember is that we have carved out this sort of system for ourselves where we seek to project some amount of impartiality going forward. This is what we have sought to do with our lives in Parliament. If you check the standing orders of Parliament, it took away the entire right of the Deputy Speaker from having an original vote.
Yeah, so the standing orders cannot conflict the Parliamentary Act. The Parliament Act.
Yeah, subsidiary. I agree.
Right.
So, so clearly from that two angle, from those two angles. Now, let's remember that the standing orders were not even even though it being a subsidiary legislation, was not approved by Parliament through the usual provisions under Article 11.
Okay.
This standing orders literally came to live with us without having to go through all the right processes. So it's quite difficult to even call it a law, even though it is it's being practiced as a law.
They have tabled the new one that they are seeking to approve to become the standing orders.
And that should be that can probably be called a law if you want to.
Yeah. So I want your direct statement on Section 14 of the Parliament Act, which says a deputy speaker or anyone presiding has the right to vote, original votes.
Now that is directly in conformity with what the Supreme Court has said. However, if it is in conflict with what the standing orders had put out, because the standing orders have taken that right away. Now,
you just said yes. By the hierarchy of laws in Article 11, the standing orders cannot deviate from the act and still remain good law.
Standing order has more challenges, as I've said earlier.
Right.
It didn't go through the usual processes of passing it, and so it has its own challenges with that.
So that's a messy confusion.
Yeah. So my point is that in addition to the confusion it's creating, this provision is clearly indirect, even though it was not before the Supreme Court, and so they clearly did not have their minds to it. It is in conformity with the decision in Justice Abdul and Attorney General. However, my point, having said that, what I'm pointing out is this: the Constitution itself is being silent on all these matters. My earlier, if at the time I was giving you the grounds that I'll be advancing for a review, having indicated the already statutory grounds, you will notice that Matters the Constitution hasn't said anything at all about whether or not the deputy speakers can vote or not vote. So but for this decision, what you'll be confronted with is whether the Supreme Court would have the right to pronounce, would be confronted with the pronunciation on this issue of the constitutionality or otherwise of Section 14 of the Constitution, because the Constitution doesn't say anything about it. And my position has been that where the Constitution does not expressly sanction a particular conduct or does not prescribe it, taking into consideration all other provisions in the Constitution, one should be able to determine the line that the Constitution would want all of us to move.
Okay.
And in doing so, we may have to ask ourselves that salient questions. What were the previous constitutions saying? What did they say regarding that area?
All right. Thank you. Let me go to Bobby. And Bobby, within 1 minute, I'm holding you to it. Within 1 minute, what do you say about whether or not there is guidance from the 1957 Constitution, Article 40 of that, and also Section 14 of the Parliament Act, which, as far as I know, remains good law in Ghana. And it says that the Speaker shall have neither an original nor a casting vote. This is the same thing that was said in that Constitution. But any other person presiding, including a deputy speaker, shall have an original vote, but no casting vote. If this is still law, how can you disagree with the Supreme Court?
I think that whether it is still law is even arguable. The reason for me saying that is that I believe that Act of Parliament was passed in the 1965.
That's right.
Which was based on the Constitution that you read, the 1957 Constitution. Now we have the current standing orders, which were based on the 1992 Constitution. Now you ask yourself whether or not the provision in the 1957 Constitution have been carried forward in its terms as it was in the 1957 Constitution into the 1992 Constitution. I do not think it is the same word for word.
Should we not rather be asking ourselves whether or not that law that we have just referred to, that act, remains law after Justice VCRAC Crab did his work on it?
Yes, I will not doubt that it doesn't remain law, but whether or not, if there are provisions in there that conflict with the standing orders, what will be the interpretation and application? And Justice, and you have rightly said, as it stands now, we do not know the character of the standing orders, whether they should be treated as subsidiary legislation, whether they should be treated as Act of Parliament properly so called. If they are treated as Acts of Parliament, does it mean that if they contain it being a latter in time law, if it contains provisions that conflict with the 1965 one, whether by the rules of interpretation, it will be deemed that the framers of this latter law intended to repeal any other provision in any other law that conflicts it. So I don't think that it's set in stone that automatically it's binding on it. So that is my position. Depending on how you argue it could be good law or it could be repealed by the standing orders, depending on the nature of the character that you give to the standing orders.
Interesting. On that matter, I go to Isana Nankuma's Facebook wall, and he made this post. He said, the Statute Law Review Commissioner, VCRAC Crab, was asked to review existing laws and bring them into accord with the Constitution. Parliament passed his revisions, and the Supreme Court upheld his revisions to be law. But when it came to Section 14 of Act 300, that's the law we are referring to, the Commission did no review. The Commissioner did no review. He merely expressed an opinion in footnote 25. That Section 14 has been superseded by Article 104. But what did that mean? Implied repeal? But is Article 104 really at variance with Section 14(2) of Act 300? Although the Supreme Court did not appear to have considered this section, their interpretation of Article 104 actually aligns the article with the pre-existing Section 14 of Act 300. That would mean that Section 14 remains good law and was never repealed, at least not by the Constitution. Osman, what do you say?
First of all, before I get to this question, let me say that the political question we are discussing, I don't think is much of an issue. I don't think anybody is saying that the Supreme Court doesn't have the authority to strike down a law that is inconsistent with the Constitution. What is actually in dispute?
Many people have said that. Many people have said that. You have not listened to some of the NDC guys?
Very well.
Yes.
Very well.
In fact, initially, even a lawyer among the minority group, Haruna Idrisu himself, has said he was shocked that they were trying to interfere or invade the space of Parliament. And what did you hear the Speaker also say? Right,
yes,
so go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that I don't think they are not saying Parliament is above the Constitution. They are just saying that that law struck down is not inconsistent with any provision of the Constitution. That's how I understand it.
It is the Supreme Court that has the power to say it is consistent or not. It has said it is inconsistent. And to that effect, it uses the power given it by the Constitution to remove it as law.
Yes, so let's leave it at that. But I'm trying to say that the political question is actually not
right.
But if we come, let me read 298 for you.
Yes, and forgive me, but you have a minute.
Okay. So then let me use my minutes. Now let me address the question first. Section 14 of the Parliament Act of 1965. We all know that Article 11(6) is requiring that we construe existing law. An existing law is the Act. The Act is an existing law. We should construe it with all the qualifications and necessary adaptations to bring it to conformity with the 1992 Constitution. So it means that if we are to apply that provision, we should first get the Supreme Court to construe it to bring it in conformity with the 1992 Constitution. But be that as it may, if we are going to rely on that act, then the validity that they declare for the decision of Parliament approving the budget will fall. You know why? Because if you go back to Section 13 of that act, you will find that the presiding officer, any person presiding in Parliament, is excluded from forum. So it's not only about Section 14. Let's go to Section 13 of that act, which talks about quorum. And because you see, this whole decision revolves around quorum and not voting, actually. So he counted himself that if there's no quorum, then they can't be voting, can they? So, but Section 13 of that act says the deputy speaker or any person presiding should not be part of the quorum.
Okay. So now very finally, in 20 seconds, if there is an attempt to stop the implementation of this decision in Parliament, what will happen?
Well, it can only be seen as a consequence of a judgment that probably was not properly, looked into. You see, we can't see this. The question we should ask ourselves is, whatever they are doing to forestall proceedings or progress in Parliament, is it in conformity with the decision or not? If it is in conformity with the decision, then it is a consequence of a bad decision.
Okay, thank you. Bobby, same to you. Because we have heard some of the members of Parliament say, on the opposition side, say that they are masters of their own procedure. And so, as far as they are concerned, they haven't seen any ruling, so to speak, or decision. If somebody attempts to stop a deputy speaker from doing what the court says he is allowed to do, what will happen?
Listen, I doubt any of the minority members will be bold enough to physically stop. That would be the height of disrespect to the rule of law. They were not happy that the majority decided on their own to overturn the decision of Speaker Babin. They should not take the law into their own hands. The Constitution said if they want, they can amend the standing orders. I think that what they can do is to form a consensus, like Robert said, sit down, look at how they can move the agenda of developing the country through parliament as an arm of government through, and stop these kind of threats. It cannot happen. We are not if we are in a democratic regime. We have a constitution that gives the power to interpret the constitution to the Supreme Court. If they are not happy, they can go back to the drawing table and come. If anybody attempts to do that, I believe that the conduct of the person, the constitution says that any person who disobeys the orders of the Supreme Court, I think it's high crime or high treason.
High crime.
Yes. So
and it's liable to imprisonment for 10 years.
Yes. And I think that anybody who does that, the Attorney General should take that step and prosecute the person. I mean, we may not disagree completely with the ruling of the Supreme Court, but it doesn't mean we should take the law into our own.
So if you did that, to be high crime and you'll be liable to imprisonment not exceeding 10 years without the option of a fine, and you will then not be eligible for election or for appointment to any public office for 10 years, beginning with the date of the expiration of the term of imprisonment.
There it is.
Yes.
In addition to contempt of parliament.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Abdullah, what do you say about that?
All for with Bobby on this, and I think that as I have been indicating, all of us must find a way to forge ahead in unison, because really, whatever the case may be, this is a verdict of the Supreme Court. Until a review changes anything, this is what we have to live with, and we have to find a way to collectively move together as a nation. That's the only way we can make progress.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Ni Ade-Clerk will be with us for the second part of this discussion, looking at matters of the economy. And if you know Ni too well, very well, when we say he's an author, he has authored even in the area of corporate governance. So let's see what ideas he will have for us to try to see if it will be listened to lessen our burden in these difficult times. My guests have been Robert Ni Ade-Clerk, who is lawyer and an author. Bobby Banson is lawyer and also teaches the law at the Ghana School of Law. Justice Abdullahi is lawyer and lecturer, UPSA Law School, and Osman Al-Hassan is a lawyer, has authored an article. He does that frequently to criticize judgments when he finds that they do not align with what he perceives to be the right position. This show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. CBG, we stand with you. Edlom Housing, where spacious homes cost less. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. And Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. We'll be right back.
The difficulties that all of us are going through now are not things that we need to have to emphasize and reiterate. It's obvious, and the source of it is also something that all of us know. It's having differing impacts on the different economies and countries, but the root causes of it are well known, and there are matters that we have to also resolve together. I believe that at the end of the day, it is this cooperation across borders in our regions that will give us the strongest base in which to deal with the problems that have emerged in these last 2 years.
So as you know by now, the president is summoned his economic management team, and they are supposed to be in a crunch meeting to deliberate on what to do to steer the economy away from what it is currently suffering and to try to cushion you a bit. So are the times said to be hard? Are they exaggerated or they are facts? Can government actually afford to cushion Ghanaians? People have had their views. We have, for example, Professor Ransford Jampo, who is saying they should take a 30% cut in pay. How much of that will that even do a dent in our circumstance? He says, for example, that there should be a reduction in the size of government. That aligns with the IEA's position. The IEA gives a specific number that the president should cut down on his bloated government. You know, he gave us a historic bloated government. Never before we've had in this country. He gave us in excess of 100 ministers and justified it, but managed to reduce it a bit. But now, what is he going to do? How much of that will lead to how much of savings for the country? Alex Mould, former boss of the GNPC, also says that government could look at there is $550 million windfall from crude oil sales that we can rely on to cushion the people. Professor Stephen Adair suggests that there should be a 25% pay cut for the executive to prevent things from getting worse. How much of that will prevent things from getting worse? He also says that the government could use the funds in the SHS, some of the senior high school, the free SHS, could use some of the funds to be spent on the top schools excluded from the policy to develop the community secondary schools in the country. He says, we have to look at it again. I think that there are certain schools which we should make autonomous and fee paying, and people will go there, but then make sure there are good community schools for everybody else. According to him, only a few of the majority of poor students usually get admission to Category A secondary schools, including Achimota. Thus, the need to make the rich students who attend such schools pay fees. Right. Achimotans are in trouble. Right. Okay, so as I announced you earlier, my guest for this segment, still here with us, Robert Nia De Klerk. He's lawyer and author. John Ewua is Chief Executive Officer, Ghana Association of Banks, and Dr. Priscilla Chumesi-Bafo is Senior Lecturer, Department of Economics, University of Ghana. Mildred Aziz is a businesswoman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Right, great. So let's begin with Priscilla. You are able to look at the economy from a certain perspective, and we've had the rare privilege of having you proffer solutions to the circumstances from the start of the year, even before we entered this year. How do you see our circumstances, and what should the president and his ministers be discussing at Peduase?
Thanks once again, Samson, and good morning to your cherished listeners and viewers. I believe that indeed these are challenging times globally. I would want to put the discussion in context.
Right.
So it's not an isolated situation for Ghana, but our situation is becoming peculiar because of the recent happenings in terms of, for example, the downgrade of Ghana by international rating agencies. That has sort of cut us off from the international capital market. which was an avenue that we had in recent times become quite used to, and for that matter was consistently, we were able to use it to manage, for instance, our currency due to inflows of some of those resources. Now it appears that because of that, that avenue is no longer there. And so and in terms of the recent depreciation of the currency as well, we know it is also cyclical, that around this time, as multilaterals close their books in December and January, they repatriate profits in foreign currency. So there's always the demand for foreign currency around this time. The challenge at this point really is the fact that because of the happenings and the seemingly difficulty that government is facing in terms of generating revenue, it is also feeding into consistently people not having too much confidence in the Ghanaian economy. So on the currency side, you see that there's a lot of speculation that is happening because people would want to make money off the movement on the forex market. On the back of that is the Ukraine war that is also leading to increase in crude prices. So indeed, it's a blend of things. So if you are a manager of the economy at this point in time, it's a difficult situation. But for me, I would say that the challenge is tackled from two perspectives. So the monetary side, the Bank of Ghana ought to do its bit. And then on the fiscal side, the President, the Cabinet Economic Management Committee will also do this. On the monetary side, I expect that the Monetary Policy Committee ought to act fast and quick at the moment to try to sort of increase the policy rate to give a signal to the market. So for example, so that it will restore a bit of confidence because of the high inflation rates that we are also currently facing. Returns on investments are basically negative in terms of real returns. So people would also want to find alternative investment elsewhere, all putting pressure on the currency. So if we are able to stabilize the currency by, for example, increasing the policy rate so that interest rates pick up, it is an indication to the market that, okay, so all is not lost. There's some that we can still salvage. And when local domestic instruments also turn out to yield positive returns, then it means that people who are also looking for alternatives elsewhere will slow down on that bit, and that demand side would come down. That could also feed into the pricing of petroleum at the pumps, because we know that the rising cost of fuel is as a result of, one, the depreciation of the currency and the price on the international market. So if we are able to sort of reduce the rate of inflation, depreciation in the currency, then we could stem that tide a bit. On the fiscal side, that is what government can do. I believe that there are a number of things. For example, there's been a talk of government should send a signal as to it tightening its belt. There is a little that those things can do, but at least it is a signal. It is an indication that government realizes that these are hard times, and for that matter, is sending the signal out there. In terms of the pricing of petroleum, when you look at the build-up, you see that there are a number of things that probably government can do to cushion the ordinary Ghanaian. So, for example, there's been the talk that there should be a revision or a removal of some of the levies. But when you look at them really, for example, sanitation and pollution levy is something 10p, price stabilization recovery levy is 14p, energy sector recovery levy is 20p. So when you look at these, it is something that government could consider to sort of cushion. But at the moment, the price of petrol at the pump is around 10 cedis. When you tally these, they don't even come up to 1 cedi. So at the you need to weigh the cost and benefit in terms of how much it is going to cost government to reduce these. We have to look at it. Is it better for government to, for example, keep it going and also find other avenues of cushioning the poor in that regard? For example, what happens to our public transportation system, for instance? These are times that those are necessary, that you could use to cushion people, so that the emphasis is on providing social safety net for those at the very bottom. But at best,
it is a global issue, and I think that we need to recognize that as well.
What is the value of the suggestions from various quarters, including from the IEA, in at least corporate governance? Priscilla just said that there's something it will do. The IEA says, take urgent measures to reduce expenditure whose level and composition remain problematic. The measures should include the following: restructuring ministries and reduce the number from 30 to 20 ministries. Then reduce the number of ministers from 86 to 56, including the 16 regional ministers. Slash executive pay by 20%. Professor Jampo says 30%. Professor Stephen Adair says 25%. Then a number of things like that, like they say, low-hanging fruits in corporate governance, and you have written on this. What will this do? Because people say this is just a drop in the ocean.
I mean, look, this is a political decision, right? It's a political decision. Whichever way you look at it, it's politics at play, and politics and economics are always bedfellows. They go together.
Yeah, but people are hungry.
Absolutely. That's why I say they go together, because the decision making at this stage is an executive decision. There's a politics of it. People put some people in power to run the affairs of the nation and all of that. And the economists will tell you that we are rational beings or something to that effect. And therefore, when there's an overflow, we sort of expand our taste somewhat. And when we are in hard times, we contract the things that we can do. And it applies at all levels. Samson, on the political front, I believe that we are dealing with a larger society. And the actions of the leadership will definitely have an impact on the way people see things and whether people understand things or not. Truth is, I don't know how much the salary bit will do and all of that, but there are a lot of perks involved. There are a lot of vehicles involved. There are a lot of free petrol involved. If you are on some WhatsApp groups and all of that, people will show you evidence of some coupons that they have just received from some friends who are in certain places, for which reason they don't have to buy fuel and all of that. I think that confidence, I agree with her absolutely, that it is a global phenomenon occurring at this time, which is having an impact on us as well, in the face of COVID-19 that nobody saw coming. However,
but there's a position by the opposition and other experts, which the World Bank in Ghana confirms, that our situation was already getting bad before COVID.
Okay, so that was my second half, and thank you for doing this job for me. But the second part is that, however, that notwithstanding, there's a reason why we always do a comparative analysis, because that impact is not exclusive to us. We are not insular. There are people around us who are having that impact as well. So if we talk about currency depreciation, it's easy to put up some sort of a graph and see whether the impact is the same for everybody. When you talk about government expenditure, it's easy to look around and see how it is happening. When you look at incomes, it's easy to do all of that. So far, we've seen that the depreciation issues with respect to the Ghana cedi as compared to the major currencies in Africa is terrible. So it's difficult on that score to then make an argument and say that it is purely a matter of COVID-19 coming on board or some issues happening. Because we ourselves, without waiting for the World Bank to tell us, can see that when I see how other currencies are behaving, it's a bit shocking to hear that the Ghanaian cedi, for example, was maybe last but one, and all of a sudden a week later is the bottom.
Worst performing
is in the bottom. So everybody else then raises an eyebrow and begins to wonder what's happening to us. Why are we in a worse situation than other people? The issue about currency, the issue about people making some money off it, people making it happens everywhere. In Nigeria, in Zambia, in Tanzania, in Kenya. Everybody does those same things. What is the reason why its impact in Ghana is greater or worse than it's in the other places? So now to the psychology of it. If I see that government is living a certain lifestyle where the people who are leading us, for example, and therefore have access to state resources and largesse, if you like, are living in a certain manner that we don't have access to, people worry. We know that when we talk about taxing, these days we talk about tax a lot. Tax is an extremely important component of the existence of any nation, whether we like it or not.
That's right.
But some people have a problem with what they consider their capital being taxed and their profit being taxed. What I mean is that it gets to a situation where if activity is really thriving, and people are doing things for which reason X and Y is being taken off it, some people don't have a problem because they stay. In a situation where the calculation is done such that you realize that what you even have at home, and it's a small proportion or percentage of the population that are in that formal tax bracket who have to bear the brunt of these matters, there becomes some worry. So I agree, some measures must be taken. That's the reason for leadership, isn't it? Leadership is by showing that, hey, we are talking about IMF. There's a meeting going on today. We remember the president saying categorically that he's winning Ghana off the IMF. I think that there's the difficulty with the politics of it, whether to say, okay, now I given to this, given the fact that these circumstances have arisen. None of us saw COVID coming, etc. I think I'm going to the IMF. That sort of decision will have to be made. Again, these are the number of ministers I put in place. This is their total cost on the state. The way I can reduce that cost, etc., is by reducing their numbers and all of that. As you say, it may be nominal in terms of what we have as a total nation, but that signal is valueless. That signal tells something to the world. In all the analysis that we hear all the time, some say you were mentioning corporate governance. I'm a bit surprised that a lot of the time when we speak, we don't hear much analysis and emphasis with respect to the capital markets in Ghana. Look, I was told not too long ago, credibly, that until MTN, once MTN got on there, and MTN didn't come there simply because it wanted to. I think that had to do with some 4G license and things like that, and as a condition, and all of that. MTN trading sometimes, I'm told, within a season, a quarter, 2 quarters, etc., can account for about 60% of the total trading value over there. Imagine the size of the capital market without MTN only. Put MTN aside. Now look at the companies that are as big, almost as big, or probably bigger than MTN in Ghana, who do not have a desire to go there. Something. In all the economies of the world, the advanced ones, if you like, or the ones struggling to make it to a certain top, that is a very key component of the activities that they do in the economy, how it affects people in their markets, in their pockets, and etc. Why doesn't it develop here? Never mind the fact that, like they say, everywhere the British went, they set up capital markets as part of colonialism and growing of the economy, except for the places where there was a disease environment, in our case, malaria. So then they took out those commodities, etc., and all of that to their places, and it has continued. We've never been able to turn it around. But in some other places where they established those things, we can see the markets growing. We tried it from 1990, it hasn't happened. Do you know what the problem is largely? We talk about all these massive state-owned enterprises, etc., or government-owned bodies, which are not participating there. And you expect private entities in this country to willingly go and participate.
The state enterprises that have specialized in making losses.
But that's
huge losses.
You know
they
why?
Don't make profit.
You know why? It's very easy. It's not rocket science. In the world of corporate governance, if you want to see...
Their CEOs are some of the best paid. Some of them paid better than the president.
Let me tell you what the problem is. Let's keep the pay aside. What happens in the fix and the correction, etc., they've done it in Brazil and all of that, is that why do you think that MTN, etc., and all that come to the markets and they are still fantastic and they do well? Why do you think there isn't that attraction? Why do you think that where government can buy some shares or some ownership in some of these listed companies, it does that and it still gets benefit? Why? It's because the government entities that we have like the 100% control. So the shareholder is government. The government then decide who is the director and who are the directors and who does everything else. When you come onto the market, and you have to play by those rules of spread, that you must have at least a certain number of people participating, etc. I will take you away, and even now I take is 25% or so, which means that you can still hold 75%. There are key issues that we must solve as a country. These are some of the matters. We can decide that these state enterprises are coming onto the market. They are large, they are big. Because government is going to hold, say, 49%. Or 47%, we must dare. Sometimes you must make the things work to your benefit. And that Ghanaians or whoever, you can cut out the foreign thing, are going to hold this portion. Something, it will bring a check on how directors are chosen. It will bring a check on how long they stay there. It will bring a check on who pays, who gets how much. It's not government who then determines anymore. And all that. Immediately those things are done. And in the West, when we cite these things with happiness, those principles happen because the public space, as far as the markets are concerned, control these principles, for which reason private entities also then get affected. Unless and until government is willing to make that aspect of our economy thrive by going through these principles. Whenever these problems happen, or whenever we have issues about how large our pie is, the pie is always missing that aspect of things, and until we enlarge it, we cannot share a good chunk.
Mildred, how are you affected by the circumstances we find ourselves in? And for you, what should be the immediate measures? Hello, Mildred. You need to unmute.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Great.
Yes. Good morning, and good morning to your cherished viewers and listeners. And I've listened to the other two guests, and you know, all the solution they are giving is very fantastic. But in fact, the ordinary Ghanaian cannot wait for all these things to take place and the impact to happen. But in the short term, I think as a businesswoman, for the average Ghanaian and everything, the government should really look at these three key points. Mm-hmm. These are every individual depend on food, shelter, and education. That's the basic thing in this regime, everybody rely on. And when it comes to these factors, the government, in connection with the Ministry of Trade, should check the industries that provide services for these, like the industries that provide food, the industries that provide shelter in terms of building and all those things. Once they do something to help the industries to not to inflate anyhow, in the very short term, I think, the ordinary Ghanaian will be cushioned in a bit. Whilst we wait for all our economists and everybody to do the ones that will take effect in the long term. Tell
us about the business you are involved in and what is happening now. That didn't used to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. Typically, we are involved in building materials and everything. And you bear witness that for these past few weeks, we've been seeing hikes in the price and everything. It's very worrying because everybody will sleep at the end of the day, and it's in a building. So it affects the building materials. Now, when we look at the cost of building materials and the rate at which it's just rising.
Give us examples. Give us examples.
Examples are cement and iron rods and blocks. These are like basic ones.
What has happened to the price of cement?
The price of cement just went out last week, and iron rods in 2 weeks, it has gone up almost like 3 times. So I think what the government
cement has gone up from what to what?
We used to sell cement between 48 to 50 cedis per bag. Now it's hovering between 51 and 55, depending on the area.
When did you start selling? When did you start selling cement for 40, 48, and 50?
Come again?
When did the price of cement go as high as 40, 48, and 50?
Yes, the last increment that pushed us to around 48 was in December. Yes, was in December. That was the last time it was pushed to 48. That was the last time it was increased. Now, because of obvious reasons, that's the currency depreciation, the cost in the fuel prices, we are expecting increases. And I know the government is always in negotiation with the cement companies. So even before they come up, they are aware and everything. But the other ones, for instance, iron rods, is the government in constant negotiation with them? Because just in 2 weeks, we've seen persistent increase in it. And I don't know, most of them are produced locally. So the government needs to look there and let us understand some of the factors that influence their increase. Because are they...
Okay, we have a problem with her line, but you hold on there and let me go to John Ewua. John Ewua is Chief Executive Officer at the Ghana Association of Banks. John, thank you very much for joining us. And you would have heard the suggestions that have come up, including what the central bank should be doing. Dr. Prisla has just been speaking about some of those things, including increase in the policy rate. And she says that will restore confidence. The IEA issued a statement and is saying almost the same thing about what has to be done. It says the Bank of Ghana should increase the policy rate by 200 basis points from 14.5% to 16.5% to stem inflation, while also increasing the attractiveness of the cedi-denominated assets to stem disinvestment from the money and capital markets. Now, Nia de Clark paid attention to the money and capital markets and the negative effects on the cedi, increase the primary reserve requirement from 8% to 10% to help curb liquidity creation by banks, which could fuel both inflation and exchange rate depreciation, change the current foreign currencies cedi primary reserve requirement to foreign currency foreign currency again. Is that a mistake? Requirement to help boost foreign currency reserves at the Bank of Ghana. And this will also meet a long-standing demand by the banks. Like Mildred, perhaps, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I can't appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for having me. First and foremost, I do not necessarily agree with the IEA on the point about using particularly the cash reserve ratio to reduce the liquidity in the environment, in the economy, because in their view, there's excess liquidity that is fueling inflation. One thing that we have to be very careful about is in our attempt to solve our one problem, we do not create series of problems. We all agree that lending to the productive sectors of the economy is not a level that we all need or we all expect. And therefore, to increase the cash reserve requirement will be limiting the ability for banks to mobilize the required liquidity to be able to lend. So the regulator, in their own wisdom, in order to propel lending to the economy, brought down the cash reserve requirement from the 10% as it was before to 8%. And we have every confidence that that should be maintained, at least in the interim, because we still need to inject liquidity into businesses, households, and in other ventures as well. But on the case of using the monetary policy to arrest the seeming rising inflation, of course, that is one of the key objectives of the policy rate, to manage inflationary pressures or otherwise. So, but you know, Bank of Ghana, again, they were supposed to be meeting latter part of this month, but decided to bring forward the MPC meetings, and we have every reason to believe that it's an attempt for them to bring forward that the decision to bring forward the MPC meeting is an attempt to come out with a statement earlier than we would have anticipated. So I would not be surprised at all if the policy rate goes up. I'm not sure about 200 basis points, but we anticipate that definitely Bank of Ghana is going to have to increase the policy rate by up to about 100 or 150 basis points when their report is released.
What do you make of suggestions about slashing executive pay, about introducing government parent cost sharing arrangement for the free senior high school policy, abolishing the purchase of past examination questions for students, scrapping NAPCO, freezing allowances for nurses and teacher trainees? President Mahama did this, didn't get any support for it. This government committed itself to it in political campaign. It must keep to that promise. Now we are saying they should freeze allowances for nursing and teacher trainees and then impose a temporary freeze on recruitment into the public service. People don't want to hear things like this. What do you say?
In fact, these are all the things that we want to hear. Unfortunately, those are the things that we want to hear. When you are in crisis, the tone that you set is critical. When people talk about how much are we going to save if public officers and government functionaries are stopped from traveling, how much money are we going to save? It is not the quantum of money, but it's the tone that is set, which is more important. If you set the right tone, then if tomorrow GUTA or UTAG or any of these trade unions is making demands, make reference to the sacrifices that the managers of the economy, knowing the problems that we are sitting on, have taken themselves. So if you look at the quantum of savings, you will not take any action because there is no one single handle of cost element that is going to give you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of savings. It is little savings here, little savings there, all together that will come to the level of savings or cost cutting that we are looking at. Let me tell you something. When the minister announced that they were going to cut the budget expenditure by 20%, there was an instant response on the international market. Instant. On that day, the Ghana's bond traded favorably, which means that the global business community is watching us. Unfortunately, when that statement came, we did not do a follow-on statement. What the business was expecting was, okay, you said 20%. What are the cost items that are going to be cut? In my view, as a finance professional, you cannot say a blanket 25% across the board for all discretionary spend. It is going to have to be a certain cost line being 100% cut off, others maybe 10%, in other cost elements 50%, others 15%, 2% here, and in all together perhaps we'll give you the average of 20% the minister talked about. We need to bring confidence and policy credibility to the table. That is what the international market is watching. Why we are getting punished is that we have kept too quiet for too long. When you are in crisis, you have to be seen to be doing something, and that which you are doing should be visible. People must know what is happening. And that is why personally, I have said, and when I said it, it became, I got all kinds of feedback from, in Ghana, everything is politicized. I said, why is the government paying my school? I have not asked for it. Why is free SHS free for me? Why is it free for people like me and a lot more people who have not asked for it? We always hide behind the absence of data, and every social intervention, we do blanket application to both the rich and the poor. So the rich get subsidized. People put their children to primary schools and pay thousands and thousands of school fees, and then when they get to secondary school, they get it for free. I just can't bring myself to understand this. There is a way of finding out the brilliant, not even just brilliant, the needy students or the needy parents who wards in the secondary schools may need some support. And some said, one other thing, there is no country, I've done my checks, no country under the sun that gives free boarding education. Free boarding. America doesn't do that, UK doesn't do that, Australia doesn't do that, Germany doesn't do that. These are the countries we visit to take money to subsidize our education, and then we give free boarding education, free breakfast, free lunch, free supper, free uniforms, free shoes, free books, free tuition, electricity, water from a poor country. I'm not sure that is how you solve a problem when you are sitting on a huge fiscal gap, and all we are doing is taking actions that further broadens the fiscal deficit. Let me also highlight a little thing that happened. We talked about the effect of some of the savings that people have recommended, the cost-cutting measures that people have recommended. I 100% support most of the initiatives that come on the table. I picked the phone and called a few friends over the last 2-3 weeks, people who work in the public sector. You call this man, I'm in Dubai, I'm at Dubai Expo. You call that Dubai Expo. Our public disposition does not reflect our circumstance. It is more or less we are doing the things that we want to do when we are, in good times, not recognizing the fact that, the country is in serious crisis. As banks, we have serious challenges. When the economy suffers, the overall burden is borne by the bank because we cushion or we fuel the economy with liquidity. And when businesses are struggling and unable to pay, the distress is transferred onto the banks, and the banks will now bear the brunt. As we speak, even from the public sector pay at the controller level, in terms of payment from the controller, we are about 2-3 months in arrears. What that happens is, potentially, we are going to have to be reporting to the Credit Reference Bureau people who do not know that they are even defaulting loans. These are the realities on the ground, and we must be seen to be tackling them head on. Let's take politics out.
All right, I'll take a break here. I'll take a break here, and when I return, Priscilla, there's a question from Richmond Kwame from Pong. He says, if the Bank of Ghana increases policy rate, it will also hike cost of credit and crowd out the private sector. How do you sync that with the recommendations of increasing policy rate to stabilize the cedi? And Richmond, who has been helping people individually about financial wellness, says that as individuals, this is what you should do. Let me name the things he wants you to do. It says, become your own CFO. That's Chief Finance Officer. Don't live a champagne life on a palm wine income. Live on less than you make. Don't act rich. Become rich. Moonlight to create extra income. Spend on assets and not on liabilities. Don't shop when you are hungry. Combine your errands into fewer trips and carpool when possible. You know, the fuel prices are just doing a hazard. And just how many weeks ago, the transportation fares were increased. It is expected that they will go up further, maybe just in the coming week. We'll be right back. Thank you very much. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Robert & Sons. Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. CBG, we stand with you. Edlom Housing, where spacious homes cost less. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. And Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. Thank you for staying with us. I'll share a few of your messages, and then we'll have your questions answered. Of course, the first question, I have already put it to Priscilla. Now, okay, I find that most of the messages are about the first segment, but why not? Let's go. This one from Agbali. It says that to learn consensus building is a must. However, the structure to encourage that consensus building is not there. That is in Parliament. In the US, it is called the cooling system. I repeat, unicameral parliamentary system is adversarial and does not promote unity and balance. Musa Abator says, the lawyer's point of view, it's very difficult for the Supreme Court to rescind their decision unless there is fresh evidence which the 7 judges have not averted their mind to. Can future set of panel of judges overturn or set aside the questionable judgments? Well, it is 30 days. After 30 days, if you don't go to do it, it's gone. So if you are talking about future and linking it to politics, then I don't know. Bobby Barnes, this one is from J. Bequin. It says, Bobby Banson, wow, young intellects who appear on Newsfile continue to thrill me with their fantastic analysis of issues, and they do so not only with book knowledge, but with wisdom. Kwesi Kesiedu says, Newsfile, able to engineer a good argument to be reviewed by the Supreme Court on their earlier verdict will be a difficult task. Nyavo John says, the courts missed the constitutional history of deputy speakers and have inserted an article in the Constitution that the framers have expressly rejected. Are you sure about that? Cost of living in Ghana. Kudodo Savior says, always on a borrowing spree. The state regulator borrowing much, likewise the citizens. Sir Stees says it's really a pakpakpa movement living in Ghana. Donald Nee says, I take it one day at a time. I try as much as possible not to worry about tomorrow because it's gonna damage my already exhausted morale. And Gasma 1 says, I'm reducing the number of times I travel to see my family. I'm checking my cravings. I want the government to do same as well. Be efficient in applying our resources. Stop the wastage and pilfering and block all the loopholes. Masaudu Jr. says, in fact, cost of living in Ghana is very unbearable, but the people in power talk as if they are living in a different Ghana we don't know about. Thank you for those messages. Now, Dr. Priscilla Chumisiba, for the question that came to you was, if you increase the policy rate, you say that, among others, will restore confidence. But Richmond Kwame Frimpong's question is that will also lead to, a crowding out and, make credit unavailable. What do you say to that?
Yes, I agree. So it's a choice we have to make. We are faced with a challenge. But first of all, if we do not stabilize the environment, it means that the investment, first of all, will not thrive. So yes, an increase in the policy rate will increase the lending rate, will inch it up. But that said, it is supposed to curtail the inflationary pressures that is happening, because investment will not thrive if inflation is on the ascendancy. So it's more like choosing the lesser of two evils. But at the end of the day, when we are able to stabilize and go inflation, control the rate of inflation, then the rate could be dropped so that you do not unnecessarily crowd out the private sector. But that said, I mean, there is even the rigid transition. I mean, the policy rate really does not translate into the lending rate on the market. So that is another discussion.
What's your take on cutting back on free SHS? The finance minister, if you remember at the very start, this was something he tried to suggest, but he was stampeded by his own party people not to dare say anything that was contrary to the president's free SHS mantra.
Indeed, the president of the Bankers Association indicated, our problem in this country has been lack of targeting. Nobody is saying that free SHS is not a good policy. It is. We have examples all over. I know of a young lady, but for which free SHS, she wouldn't have gone to the secondary school. So for those people, that policy is great. But there are a lot of beneficiaries of the program that do not need it, and that is the issue that we have. What is the point in granting free SHS to children that go to top class private schools during the primary level, and all of a sudden those children are, for example, holding mobile phones that are more expensive than their school fees, and they are being given for free. So the issue is, can we sit back, target, and probably roll out a scholarship scheme for the needy students who rather would be the greater beneficiaries of the program, rather than giving it out to everybody for free. But at this point, really, I believe that given that we are in hard times, it may not be a very prudent measure to take at the moment, because even the supposedly affluent families are also feeling the pinch of the hardship that is occurring. But I think that going forward, it is something that needs to be looked at. The problem for me has always been the politicization of these things, because as we talk about, the moment implementers of the program realize the challenge and try to modify it, another group is available to sing a song in victory, to say that yes, we said it.
Not too long ago, you were very concerned reading the statistics of unemployment as generated by the state itself. When you hear that some of the measures to take is to scrap NAPCO, is to stop recruitment into the public services, how do you take that?
Indeed, I have always had the opinion that expanding the public sector is not a way to solve a problem of unemployment. So for us, we have to look at our industrialization strategy. And it is the most effective way of generating jobs. We have to look at what is happening to our manufacturing sector, investments in the sector, encouraging young people to move into that sector, particularly along the agricultural value chain, adding value to the produce and all that come out of our agricultural sector, so that we create layers of employment. And at the back of all that is happening with the depreciation of the cedi is our over-reliance on imports, because we are really importing everything into this country. I mean, yesterday I was surprised to find something on Facebook that somebody had bought imported intestines. And I was shocked to know that all these things are imported. So we exchange our hard-earned cedi for the dollar to go and import, I mean, everything. And that is the problem. If we are able to take
Maybe we are importing Willie. Because if this is where we get to.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Or indeed, if we are able to take our industrialization drive seriously, create agro-processing firms, that means that we'll be solving the problem of the constant pressure on the cedi.
And this is long term.
Medium to long term,
okay.
Really, medium to long term, because these agro-processing firms, they are not big giant firms that require lots of investment to set up. When you look at some of the firms under the One District, One Factory initiative, I think that those are examples that we could use to generate the jobs, ease the pressure on the currency, and also, I mean, move forward as a country as we structure.
We hear the cedi will get worse and circumstances will not normalize anytime soon, irrespective of whatever the measures it is that we are talking about. The president and his men and women are meeting now and deciding what to do. If you had to tell them two things they should focus on immediately and the long term, what will it be, aside what you have said already?
It reminds me of a video somebody sent me this morning where my good friend and senior ace Ankuma says, I'm working like a bull and I'm paying my taxes.
Exactly, the government
and
got
the
to
government
work too.
also has to work like a bull. It's not my duty to tell the government how to fix the economy. He didn't even know how to fix it. I'm still quoting this. He didn't know how to fix it. Then why did he run for office? End of quote. You know, it sounded a bit funny to me watching it this very morning when I said I was coming here to a friend and all of that. But in a certain sense, those words are so true. It's a bit, you know, in many ways, yes, I like it that the government is taking this initiative. But I thought to myself that if it's a cabinet meeting, I was a bit surprised that it was thrown out to us as, cabinet is going to meet today to talk about the economy. I mean, I think that is what government is there to do. What I mean by that is, seriously, the cabinet does not ordinarily just announce that I'm going to meet today and talk about the economy. That's the point I'm making. That cabinet meets on the regular. And the president deciding to go to Pejuase with his cabinet ministers, and all of that, and then to have tweets come out saying that now it's a contest between should we go to IMF or should we pursue e-levy, or is it one of the two or neither of the two kind of thing. I was a bit surprised. I thought this is the business of government, to be doing it all the time. What can I say?
This is a special one. Yes.
It's a special one. I'm saying that if it's a special one, then it's almost a bit late, somewhat. I mean, because this thing has been staring us in the face, and you said that the World Bank, for example, has said that we're already on the downslope and all of that. And all. I've said on this program in the past, at the beginning of free SHS, you remember, some time ago, maybe 2 years or so, I haven't been on the show for a while, where I used my own father as an example. I said that growing up in Bokobi, there was no way he would have ended up in a decided college as he did if he did not have some free money to take to school. And he had actually said that himself. But on the same score, that man paid every single peso of my education throughout my 7 years of education at Achimota School for a reason. He did not come to believe that merely because Nkrumah's government had done it for him, that it should be the regular way of doing things. That is the targeting point. We talk about a means test. It's easy to determine it. Bro, you're mentioning somebody who went to Harvard earlier on and all of that, they will tell you. I know people who gain admission to Harvard who don't go because some other institution gave them all the money. Harvard will hardly do that, no matter how poor you are. Because they call it skin in the game. You have to have some skin in the game. I'm still paying my fees. I have some parts that I was paid for my program at Harvard, my master's degree. That is the way it works.
Chief, you finished Harvard how many years ago?
I'm paying me for 15 years.
Okay.
Because
your last point.
Something. Because you are doing some work. You are doing something, you're generating something. This is here. Free SHS could be targeting or wholesale. This is Kendo Foriata in 2018. Finance Minister Kendo Foriata appears to be in agreement with the suggestion that the free senior high school program may have to be targeted at persons with genuine need and not made to benefit everyone. Using himself as an example, the minister says someone in his economic bracket should not be enjoying such a policy. I made that point before this article came out. And I agree absolutely and wholly. I personally do not want to pay the government to pay my children's school fees for me. I think that if the government has helped me go to some school, public school, done this and all of that, some say you shouldn't benefit from free SHS. With all the dough you are making on a daily basis in the courts. You have to make some effort. You see what I mean? I don't say that we shouldn't have free education for people. There are people who need it. We must do it for them. But that heavy burden is also one of the reasons. The only place where I probably slightly differ with Priscilla is that she says that it's difficult at this time. I think that the next cohort, so I'm not exactly differing. The next cohort going forward, government should consider that people who are able to pay should contribute and lessen the burden of government, because things won't change anytime.
Right. Mildred, what will be your final words to government and its team as they listen to you? And also, as an individual, what are you doing to survive?
Yes, something like I rightly said, all these things, government needs to look at these 3 key points, then make it easy for everybody. Because once they engage these industries that produce these things, because most of these industries even have tax holidays, they have tax exemptions. So it is this time that they also need to contribute to help government so that they don't unnecessarily increase things anyhow. They really need to be guarded by government so that they don't take advantage of the increasing dollar, the depreciating dollar, and the increasing in fuel to just increase their prices anyhow. Because we've seen it. Look, just like I was saying, in these past 2 weeks, iron rods have moved from 4,600 to 6,200, almost 40%. So, and these are things that are being produced in Ghana. Yes, the city depreciation will affect it and all that. But government really needs to look into those things and see that these industries too are not taking advantage of the situation. They also need to help. It's a global thing, like Rachel said. Yeah. So So I think, I mean, once they look at these key things in terms of food, shelter, and education, they are already doing something about it in terms of the free education.
Yeah.
But these two other things, they need to look at it.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that in the short term will help to cushion the ordinary Ghanaian.
Yes. John, in a minute, what will you tell us? What are you doing by yourself to survive the circumstance?
In my view, the president and his ministers in their meetings should consider. As the country, we need to, for the first time, look a bit long term. Not too long ago, we had a similar seminar at a hotel somewhere talking about homegrown policies. And what became of that? All of a sudden, we are back to square one, and we are having to have the same discussion again, because as a country, we are always sitting at one place and not looking at the long-term effect of some of the policy initiatives that we take. We have an export-led policy as a country. Meanwhile, we have discounted values of importations. How to compete with the small businesses that or manufacturing concerns that we set up in Ghana to be able to stop our dependence on importation. I don't know, it is counterintuitive. To one bit want to increase exports, and another bit saying you can bring importation from other countries and I'll discount the values so that it becomes cheaper. How does the company that is meant to export survive? And if this country is to move forward and we get to the point where we stop discussing these matters of foreign currency depreciation and unemployment, it is building our light to heavy industries in this country. That is where jobs are created. We have as an economy a jaundiced GDP structure. A country of our standing currently as Ghana, service sector contributes more than the industry.
Okay.
It should not be the case. So I want the president to take a long-term view. He may not be doing his time, but if he sets the foundation for others to build on, then that should be it. But we should, for the first time, have a long-term view of some of the initiatives that we undertake as a country.
Thank you so very much, John Ewa. And as always, my outfit is by Habil's Couture. And Habil's Couture, you can find them at Dringano Gate, East Legon, and the contact 0200 84 1988 0200 84 1988. Thank you all so very much for tuning in and staying here with us for all this time. On the occasion of International Women's Day, we thank Wilma Africa for helping us celebrate some of our amazing women who have been doing a good job to support us, discuss matters and shape the national opinion. Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo, this is from Wilma Africa, saying thank you so much for making yourself available always to help national issues. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so on that note, have a good afternoon. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini.